Morning, everyone. It's so lovely to sit together with all of you this morning. My name is Joanne, and I'm here in New Paltz in my living room, and in a house that's built on the land that was inhabited by the Munsee Lenape and the Esopus Lenape, and then taken over in the 1670s by the Huguenots, who then brought slaves to work the land that they were inhabiting. And that's the history of where I'm sitting today. And it's gray. It's very heavy. The sky is heavy and low and filled with sort of dark gray clouds that who knows what bring later today. And sometimes I think gray clouds get a bad rap that, it's like, it's a gray day. It's going to force me inside. But maybe I can get into my garage and put the tools away, put them where they belong so I can find them a little bit easier the next time I need to do a project. So, and maybe that's a little bit of the upside of the pandemic, being driven inside. We've created this Zendo online that's amazing to me. It's unbelievable that folks that had a difficulty coming to the Village Zendo in the city for whatever reason, a distance, a difference in ability, whatever it may be, are now with us and from all over the world as well. We've got Australia and China and Bolivia, Italy, all over sitting with us together. So I'm sure going forward, as the Zendo opens again someday, we're going to be taking this into account. It's shifted things for us, opened our eyes a bit. So a bow of gratitude to the technology that I fully do not understand that makes this possible. It's a miracle, really. And that same technology maybe has a bit of a dark side too. So like many of you, I participate in some social media. And Facebook in particularly. And so, and it's been incredible. It's amazing that I can connect with old friends, that have been long lost and family members that I might not, be hearing about and what's going on with them. And so it's largely been amazing. But there's also friends, that can push buttons for sure. So a high school friend of mine, he was the valedictorian of the class ahead of me, then went on to Ivy League law school and worked within government. And his political views, how shall we say, differ very, very, very strongly from my own. So, most of what he posts I read because he's very intelligent. He didn't get to where he is because he's not smart. He just thinks very differently than I do. So I try to read everything, and then something will come along about the glories of Ronald Reagan, and I respond with a simple murderer, and that seems to quiet the conversation because messing with a queer person who lived through the AIDS epidemic is not something you want to do. So he will generally not respond to that. But recently he posted something about how happy he was about Amy Coney Barrett's being sworn in. It was a hooyah for him. And, do I just keep scrolling, or do I respond? So I responded and I said, it feels like a kick in the teeth to the LGBTQ community. And he responded with explain yourself, clarify. So now I'm pissed. Now I'm just really angry because here's one of the most political savvy folks that I know, clearly aware of the liberties for the communities, that I'm associated with, being on the chopping block in a very real way, within days. Fulton versus the city of Philadelphia was, their friends who adopt, who are in the process of adopting. Their lives could be changed, right then in that moment. And he's asking me to clarify myself when he knows exactly what we're talking about. So I think it might stem a little bit from, that high school relationship, but it stimulated that picked on queer kid energy in me that made me feel super vulnerable, and made it feel like, yeah, it's okay to call a fag and spit on him and push him into a locker. That's okay. That's normal. It hit that part. So, and it makes me wonder about meaningful change, real meaningful change in our understanding of each other. Can it be learned? Can it be taught? Can it be discussed in a platform, where we have an awakening in that way? Or does it take really being challenged in your own viewpoint, really seeing, someone else's experience fully? So I remember years ago, it was probably 89 or 90, marching in an ACT UP march. And someone had pointed out David Wojnarowicz. I'm going to kill his name. I'm sorry, I have a hard time saying it every time. Visual artist and activist who was standing on the corner and Astor Place with a sign he had painted himself, reds and yellows, dark and powerful. And it just simply asked, "Where is your anger?" And he was enraged, and we were enraged, and he was filled with rage. And he was yelling and asking everyone marching by, "Where is your anger?" Screaming it, neck veins bulging. And he was not well at the time, thin and wasting, and his eyes sunken, using really the last of his energy, to insist that people pay attention and insist, uh, at reminding us at what was at stake, what we really, what the gamble was, what's at stake here. So recently there's been this sort of movement in social media, in the media, sort of everywhere. I think it's a natural sort of response to say, let's come together, let's heal, let's reach across, let's make these two sides whole, and have, if you will, the Kumbaya moment. And I think it's important. I think that's absolutely something that does need to happen for this democracy to work. But that dialogue can't be white, hetero, cis, gender dominated. It can't be if we are to truly see each other. If there's to be a kumbaya moment. Kumbaya is a Gullah, apparently, a Gullah word that means come by God, come by God. So to be seen, to have God come by, and take a look, to be truly seen for who we are, not through the lens of what we've been looking through things at for way too long. So does it take seeing a wasting man on the corner with bulging neck veins, to see the horror of a government comfortably ignoring a group of people, whoever that group of people is? So I hesitate to share with you the story I'm going to share with you. One, because it's close to the bone for me. Two, because I'm aware that it manipulates feelings and emotions. And, in the end, maybe that's what a Dharma talk is about. Maybe that's what it's about ultimately. But so 17 years ago this week, I was in Houston, Texas, because a friend of mine, I was still dancing at the time, barely, sort of lured out of retirement for this event. But a friend of mine who I danced with for years had started an organization called the Remember Project in Houston, mostly based on dancers responding to AIDS. Broadway Cares Equity Fights AIDS here in New York, because when she'd arrived in Houston, she found that there was a hole that needed to be filled. People living with HIV and AIDS their needs weren't being fully met in that government. So she looked for ways to fundraise and to help people in her community there. And the dance community came out strong, being so affected by the crisis. And so she'd asked me to come down a couple of times to perform, and I had performed other choreographers' work or helped. But this year, 17 years ago, she asked me to come down, and I had created a new solo that I was going to be presenting there. So I'd come down a couple of days. It was December 1st was the concert, excuse me. And I'd come down a couple of days prior to rehearse and spend some time with a dear old friend. And we'd gone out to see Will Ferrell's Elf. It was just out in the theaters, so we'd had a lovely evening out. And I was heading back to the bed and breakfast I was staying in the Montrose, a gay neighborhood in Houston. And so I was about 80 to maybe 100 yards from the door of that bed and breakfast, getting ready to cross the street when a car had pulled up right close to the stop sign where I was. And I continued crossing as he, parked, but the driver jumped out quickly and with some sort of urgency headed towards me and said, hey, can you help me? I don't know where I am. And, I said, I'm not really familiar with the neighborhood. I'm, just visiting, but I think I know where the street is that you're looking for, and gave him the best directions I could and turned to walk away. And that's when I thought, oh, something has fallen out of this tree because something hit me in the head. And my first moment's thought was something had fallen out of the tree above me. And then the fabric of the jacket I was wearing went taut between my shoulder blades. And then I was hit again. And it was probably the second blow that opened a scar in my head, the second big hit. And then I knew, I'm being assaulted. And it became aware I'm really being assaulted. This may be it. This is not good. I'm being hit with a lead pipe or a crowbar of some sort. The third hit kind of came as I was trying to open my jacket up and get out, see if I could slide my body out of the jacket and away because he was holding me and continued to hit me. And I was unable to, and I was trying to call out for help, help, I'm being assaulted, but was all that would come out. I couldn't find my voice. It was stuck in my jacket. And everything became really quiet and really still. And in the Enmei-juku Kanungyo, we chant nen nen. And that nen is the mind moment, a frame of thought, much like these little boxes on the screen, just a moment, all piled up. And the bark on the tree of the tree I thought the branch fell out of, amazing, incredible. And my mind is questioning, what type of tree is this? And I'm thinking to myself, why are you thinking, what type of tree is this? You're being assaulted. All these thoughts rising, all at once. The light, being amazed at how the light was that evening, the sound of my feet, being amazed that I had evacuated myself, and knowing from my background that that's a sign of, fight or flight, a last ditch effort, and so, and being sort of amazed at that. And I made it in between two cars on the street. And he finally said, give me your money, bitch. And I somehow calmly responded and said, for me to do that, you need to stop hitting me. And he did. And I reached into my pocket and pulled out the 60 or so bucks I had on me, and I handed it to him. And for a brief moment, we made eye contact. And in that moment, his suffering was so visible. And he saw that I saw his suffering. And all of those Nen mind moments, oh, that's just my dog making belching sounds. Sorry, you're okay. All of those Zen mind moments built up that brought him to this moment, and all of those Zen moments, mind moments that brought me to this moment met. And we both saw each other for 1 second, and I turned away, fully expecting to be beaten more, because being seen in that way, I think, was reprehensible for him. But he had run down the street and was now in the passenger side of the car, and his accomplice was going to take them away. And so I peeked my head out from the two cars I was between to see if I could see the make of the car, get a license plate, as it was only 4 or 5 cars away from where I was. And at that moment, I looked down and I noticed the extent of my injuries. I, kind of came to my senses and went, oh boy, I need to get help and I need to get help quick. So I didn't really get a full look at it, but made it back to the bed and breakfast, which I was close to, asked for help, was taken to the emergency room. My wounds were cleaned. I received 37 staples to the back of my head where they pulled the flesh back together and put it back together. Had a CAT scan and luckily had no damage that they could see on the CAT scan, at least. That might be arguable by my husband, but no damage that they saw in the CAT scan. And the nurses were amazing. And they sort of were one of the reasons I very likely became a nurse and followed that path. And they also shared that I was one of 6 in the emergency room in the gay community that weekend that had been beaten. And the police officer sort of sheepishly confirmed it, but just took the report. And it was never reported in the newspapers. All of those assaults were never reported. And what I heard from the gay community there was that the retaliation for reporting an assault within the gay community was so strong that they really wanted me, as someone who didn't live there, to come forward for them to talk about what happened in that community. So I did so. So one can argue that the actions of my assailant in Houston and the actions of my friend on Facebook are different. But for me, it feels like my jacket is being pulled taut between my shoulder blades. And it feels like I'm being hit with a pipe in the head. It doesn't feel any different. So to not acknowledge someone's genuine fear that their rights will be taken away or are in jeopardy, it makes my neck veins bulge. And it makes me really take to heart David Warnerovich's question of where is your anger? And there's a lot to be angry about now, it feels like. There's a lot of things that anger me right now. And for me, anger can be a trap. I can get caught up in it and it can drive me. I can be blind in my, rage. It's no wonder that they call it blind rage, that you're not in control of your actions. Or I have an old reflexive response to anger as well, that in the household I grew up in, and it may be the Irish Catholic way, at least it was for us, that anger was not allowed. It's not an emotion that we have. It's sinful, and you just push it down and don't experience it. So after a few years of therapy, I was able to go, oh, maybe that doesn't work so well. Maybe I'm actually really pissed and need to experience that I'm really pissed. And so, I found out exactly how angry I was, and could go from there and from work with it from there. So bearing witness to emotions that arise. This is the precept of not holding on to anger, turning suffering into wisdom. This is how the Zen peacemakers work with the precept of not holding on to anger. And in that expression, as well as in the ones we work with in the precepts at Village Zendo, Bodhidharma and Dogen Zenji's expression of this precept, none of it says don't be angry. Nowhere does it say don't be angry. It's, perfectly okay. And in fact, your anger may be the most skillful expression that there is in a moment. So when I came to Zen, it was at Roshi's house. It was a while back, and on the image on the altar at that time was Manjushri with the sword. We have sort of a sweeter Manjushri now. He's got a little sword, and he's kind of chunky and jolly and doesn't look so threatening. But I think I walked in and went, well, what's this dude with a sword, got in store for me? I'm not entirely sure I'm down with this. I kind of want the, deep in Samadhi Shakyamuni Buddha, image. I think that's what is the medicine I need. But I've come over the years to see that that image and that energy is right in the Zendo. It's the image that belongs in the Zendo. So there's a koan because there's always a koan. And this is a koan where Shakyamuni Buddha is inside the temple grounds, and he calls to Manjushri. He says, Manjushri, Manjushri, why don't you come through the gate? And Manjushri says, because I don't see myself as outside. So when we're facing these strong, and deep and difficult emotions that so many of us are facing now, can we allow that emotion that arises, these emotions that arise, to not divide us further, to not make outside and inside, even when there are those who are actively building walls and gates to divide? Can we, in the face of that, still say, because I do not see myself as outside? Is that possible? It's a difficult task for me, for sure. I'm not going to lie. And it's really only made possible by seated practice, by putting my mind down on the cushion and taking a few breaths, because my reflexes aren't always the ones that arise out of seated practice. So, and I really think it's only in that place, when we see no outside, that we can wield Manjushri's sword, that we can cut through our delusions and others with skill. So Bodhidharma speaks on the precept of not holding on to anger and says, self-nature is subtle and mysterious. I don't know if Soshin is with us. As she spoke on the precepts, and all of Bodhidharmas start with self-nature is subtle and mysterious. In the realm of the selfless Dharma, not contriving reality for the self is called the precept of not indulging in anger. So not separate from anything, no place to set up my anger tent. I can experience it, or you can experience the anger, but I wouldn't make it a bedfellow per se. A quick sort of conversation, see where it came from, what it's about, but don't have to move in with it. And then Dogen says, not advancing, not retreating, not real, not empty. There is an ocean of bright clouds. There is an ocean of solemn clouds. Right here with the emotions that are arising, whether they're the clouds that I have outside today that I spoke of that are dark and heavy, or whether the bright and happy, fluffy clouds that we so desire. And I'm going to leave you with a poem by Mary Oliver called Clouds. All afternoon, sir, your ambassadors have been turning into lakes and rivers. At first they were just clouds, like any other. Then they swelled and swirled. Then they hung very still. Then they broke open. This is, I suppose, just one of the common miracles, a transformation, not a vision, not an answer, not a proof, but I will put it there, close against my heart, where the need is, and it serves the purpose. I go on, soaked through, my hair slicked back like corn or wheat, shining and useful. So I hope whatever your sky looks like today, whatever type of clouds are in it, that they can break open for you and soak you through and make you slick and shiny and useful.